Qt is a cross-platform application framework that is widely used for developing application software with a graphical user interface, and also used for developing non-GUI programs such as command line tools and consoles for servers. Qt uses standard C++ but makes extensive use of a special code generator together with several macros to enrich the language. Qt can also be used in several other programming languages via language bindings. It runs on the major desktop platforms and some of the mobile platforms. It has extensive internationalization support. Non-GUI features include SQL database access, XML parsing, JSON parsing, thread management, network support, and a unified cross-platform application programming interface for file handling. Qt is available under a commercial license, GPL v3 and LGPL v2. All editions support many compilers, including the GCC C++ compiler and the Visual Studio Suite. Qt is developed by the Qt Company, who owns the Qt trademark and copyright, and the Qt project under open source governance, involving individual developers and firms working to advance Qt. Before the launch of the Qt project, it was produced by Nokia's Qt Development Frameworks division, which came into existence after Nokia's acquisition of the Norwegian company Trolltech, the original producer of Qt. In February 2011, Nokia announced its decision to drop Symbian technologies and base their future smartphones on Microsoft platform instead. 1 month later, Nokia announced the sale of Qt's commercial licensing and professional services to Digia, with the immediate goal of taking Qt support to Android, iOS and Windows 8 platforms, and to continue focusing on desktop and embedded development, although Nokia was to remain the main development force behind the framework at that time. Digia transferred the Qt business and copyrights to their wholly owned subsidiary, the Qt Company, in September 2014. History: Hervé Nord and Eric Chameng began development of Qt in 1991, 3 years before the company was incorporated as Quasar Technologies, then changed the name to Trolltech and then to Trolltech. The toolkit was called Qt because the letter Q looked appealing in Hervé's Emacs typeface, and T was inspired by XT, the X toolkit. The first 2 versions of Qt had only 2 flavors, Qt X11 for Unix and Qt Windows for Windows. The Windows platform was only available under a proprietary license, which meant free open-source applications written in Qt for X11 could not be ported to Windows without purchasing the proprietary edition. At the end of 2001, Trolltech released Qt 3.0, which added support for Mac OS X. The Mac OS X support was available only in the proprietary license until June 2003, when Trolltech released Qt 3.2 with Mac OS X support available under the GPL. In June 2005, Trolltech released Qt 4.0. Nokia acquired Trolltech ASA on June 17, 2008 and changed the name first to Qt Software, then to Qt Development Frameworks. Since then it focused on Qt development to turn it into the main development platform for its devices, including a port to the Symbian S60 platform. Version 1.0 of the Nokia Qt SDK was released on June 23, 2010. The source code was made available over Gitorious, a community-oriented Git source code repository, to gather an even broader community that is not only using Qt but also helping to improve it. Licensing: at all times, Qt was available under a commercial license that allows developing proprietary applications with no restrictions on licensing. In addition, Qt has been gradually made available under several increasingly free licenses. Until version 1.45, source code for Qt was released under the free Qt license. This was viewed as not compliant with the open source principle by the Open Source Initiative and the Free Software definition by Free Software Foundation because, while the source was available, it did not allow the redistribution of modified versions. Controversy erupted around 1998 when it became clear that the K desktop environment was going to become one of the leading desktop environments for Linux. As it was based on Qt, many people in the free software movement worried that an essential piece of one of their major operating systems would be proprietary. with the release of version 2.0 of the toolkit, the license was changed to the ʻkjuːt public license, a free software license but one regarded by the Free Software Foundation as incompatible with the GPL. Compromises were sought between KDE and Trolltech whereby ʻkjuːt would not be able to fall under a more restrictive license than the ʻkjuːt, even if Trolltech was bought out or went bankrupt. This led to the creation of the KDE Free ʻkjuːt Foundation, which guarantees that ʻkjuːt would fall under a BSD-style license should no free open-source version of ʻkjuːt be released during 12 months. In 2000, ʻkjuːt X11 2.2 was released under the GPL v2, ending all controversy regarding GPL compatibility. In 2002, members of the KDE on Cygwin project began porting the GPL-licensed ʻkjuːt X11 code-base to Windows. This was in response to Trolltech's refusal to license ʻkjuːt Windows under the GPL on the grounds that Windows was not a free open-source software platform. The project achieved reasonable success although it never reached production quality. This was resolved when Trolltech released ʻkjuːt Windows 4 under the GPL in June 2005. ʻkjuːt A4 now supports the same set of platforms in the free software open-source editions as in the proprietary edition, so it is now possible to create GPL-licensed free open-source applications using ʻkjuːt on all supported platforms. The GPL v3 with special exception was later added as an added licensing option. The GPL exception allows the final application to be licensed under various GPL-incompatible free software open-source licenses such as the Mozilla Public License 1.1. On January 14, 2009, ʻkjuːt version 4.5 added another option, the LGPL, which should make ʻkjuːt even more attractive for non-GPL open-source projects and for closed applications. In March 2011, Nokia sold the commercial licensing part of ʻkjuːt to Digia, creating ʻkjuːt Commercial. Platforms: ʻkjuːt works on the following platforms: Android ʻkjuːt for Android, formerly known as Necessitas. Embedded Linux ʻkjuːt for embedded platforms, personal digital assistant, smartphone, etc. iOS ʻkjuːt for iOS platforms, OS XOW ʻkjuːt for Apple OS X. Supports applications on Cocoa, QNX/BlackBerry 10 ʻkjuːt for QNX and the QNX-based BlackBerry 10 platform. Sailfish OS ʻkjuːt for Sailfish OS. VxWorks ʻkjuːt for VxWorks. Wayland ʻkjuːt for Wayland. ʻkjuːt applications can switch between graphical backends like X and Wayland at load time with the platform command line option. This allows a seamless transition of ʻkjuːt applications from X11 to Wayland. Windows ʻkjuːt for Microsoft Windows XP, Vista, 7, 8, Windows ʻkjuːt for Windows CE6 and Windows Embedded Compact 7. Windows RTA support for WinRT-based Windows 8 apps and Windows Phone 8, X11 ʻkjuːt for X Windows System, external ports. After Nokia opened the ʻkjuːt source code to the community on Gitorious, various ports appeared. Here are some of them: ʻkjuːt for Open Solariza ʻkjuːt for Open Solaris. ʻkjuːt for Haiku ʻkjuঃt for Haiku. ʻkjuːt for OS/2 ʻkjuঃt for OS/2 ECS platform. ʻkjuːt for Web OS experimental development of ʻkjuːt for Web OS on Palm Pre. ʻkjuːt for Amazon Kindle DX experimental development of ʻkjuːt for Amazon Kindle DX. ʻkjuːt Ubuntu plugin for ʻkjuːt 5 to provide Ubuntu integration, including support for the Mir display server. ʻkjuːt for Amiga OS ʻkjuːt for Amiga OS. ʻkjuːt for Tizen ʻkjuঃt for Tizen. Deprecated ports: Symbian ʻkjuঃt for the Symbian platform. ʻkjuঃt replaced Nokia's Ivcon as the supported UI SDK for developing Symbian applications. Windows Mobile ʻkjuঃt for Windows CE 5.0 and Windows Mobile. Mago/Harmat and the port for Mago and the official native API for Nokia N9. No longer supported, though parts of it lives on the Sailfish port. Editions: there are two editions of ʻkjuঃt available, the ʻkjuঃt Enterprise Edition, a commercial edition sold by Digia, and the open source edition. Qt is available under the following copyright licenses: GNU-GPL, GNU-GPL 3.0 version, and the commercial developer license. Releases: Qt 4. Trolltech released Qt 4.0 on June 28, 2005 and introduced 5 new technologies in the framework: Tulip, a set of template container classes; Interview, a modeler Euro-viewer Euro-controller architecture for item views; Arthur, a 2D painting framework; Scribe, a Unicode text renderer with a public API for performing low-level text layout; Main window, a modern action-based main window, toolbar, menu, and docking architecture. Qt 5 Quartz 5 was officially released on December 19, 2012. This new version marked a major change in the platform, with hardware-accelerated graphics, QML and JavaScript playing a major role. The traditional C++ only widgets continued to be supported, but did not benefit from the performance improvements available through the new architecture. Qt 5 brings significant improvements to the speed and ease of developing user interfaces. Framework development of Qt 5 moved to open governance, taking place at qt-project.org. It is now possible for developers outside Digia to submit patches and have them reviewed. Software architecture. Qt, when it was first released, relied on a few key concepts: complete abstraction of the GUI. Euro. When first released, Qt used its own paint engine and controls, emulating the look of the different platforms it runs on when it drew its widgets. This made the porting work easier because very few classes in Qt depended really on the target platform. However, this occasionally led to slight discrepancies where that emulation was imperfect. Recent versions of Qt use the native style APIs of the different platforms, on platforms that have a native widget set, to query metrics and draw most controls, and do not suffer from such issues as much. On some platforms Qt is the native API. Some other portable graphical toolkits have made different design decisions. For example, WX Widgets uses the toolkits of the target platform for its implementations. Signals and slots, a language construct introduced in Qt for communication between objects which makes it easy to implement the observer pattern while avoiding boilerplate code. The concept is that GUI widgets can send signals containing event information which can be received by other controls using special functions known as slots. Meta-object compiler. The meta-object compiler, termed mock, is a tool that is run on the sources of a ~kjuːt program. It interprets certain macros from the C++ code as annotations, and uses them to generate added C++ code with meta information about the classes used in the program. This meta information is used by Qt to provide programming features not available natively in C++: signals and slots, introspection and asynchronous function calls. Modules. Starting with Qt 4.0, the framework was split into individual modules. With Qt 5.0, the architecture was modularized even further. Qt is now split into essential and add-on modules. Qt Essentials. Qt Core, the only required Qt module, containing non-graphical classes used by other modules. Qt GUI, the central GUI module. In Qt 5, this module now depends on OpenGL, but no longer contains any widget classes. Qt Widgets contains classes for classic widget-based GUI applications, and the QSCENE graph classes was split off from Qt GUI in Qt 5. Qt QML module for QML and JavaScript languages. Qt Quick, the module for GUI application written using QML2. Qt Quick controls widget-like controls for Qt Quick, Qt Quick Layouts layout for arranging items in Qt Quick, Qt Network abstraction layer. Complete with TCP, UDP, HTTP, SSL and since Qt 5.3 SPDY support. Qt Multimedia classes for audio, video, radio and camera functionality. Qt Multimedia Widgets, the widgets from Qt Multimedia. Qt SQL contains classes for database integration using SQL. Qt WebKit Qt's WebKit implementation and API. Qt WebKit widgets the widget API for Qt WebKit. Qt test classes for unit testing Qt applications and libraries. Qt add-ons, active Qt classes for applications which use ActiveX. Qt Bluetooth classes accessing Bluetooth hardware. Qt dbus classes for IPC using the dbus protocol. Qt NFC classes accessing NFC hardware. Only officially supported on BlackBerry hardware so far. Qt OpenGL legacy module containing the OpenGL classes from Qt4. In Qt5 the similar functionality in Qt GUI is recommended. Qt positioning classes for accessing GPS and other location services. Split off from the Qt4 mobile module of Qt location. Supported on Android, BlackBerry, iOS and Linux. Qt script legacy module for scripting Qt application using ECMAScript JavaScript. In Qt5, using similar classes in Qt QML is recommended. Qt sensors classes for accessing various mobile hardware sensors. Used to be part of Qt Mobile and Qt4. Supported on Android, BlackBerry, iOS, WinRT, Mare and Linux. Qt serial port classes for access to hardware and virtual serial ports. Supported on Windows, Linux and Mac OS X. Qt WebSockets provides a WebSocket implementation. Qt XML legacy module containing classes for SAX and DOM-style XML APIs. Replaced with QXML Stream Reader and QXML Stream Writer classes in Qt Core. Qt XML pattern support for XPATH, XQUEOY, XSLT and XML scheme validation. Tools. Qt Creator, a cross-platform IDE for C++ and QML. Qt Designer's GUI layout design functionality is integrated into this relatively new IDE, although Qt Designer can still be called as a standalone tool. Make, a tool that automates the generation of make files for development project across different platforms, programming language bindings. Qt has a range of bindings for various languages, which implement some or all of its feature set. Uses, organizations using Qt, European Space Agency, DreamWorks, Lucasfilm, Panasonic, Philips, Samsung, Siemens, Volvo, Walt Disney Animation Studios, Blizzard Entertainment, software using Qt. Example applications using Qt are Ultraquartus, a design and simulation tool for programmable logic. Autodesk Maya. Bitcoin Core. Chameleon. Mathematica. Google Earth. KDE, a desktop environment for Unix-like operating systems. Skype. Spotify for Linux. Ubuntu. VirtualBox, an OS virtualization software package. MuseScore music score writing software. And the VLC media player. See also, list of widget toolkits, Android software development, iOS SDK, references. Bibliography. External links, Qt project website, Qt company website, Qt blogs, migrate from GTK Plus to Qt, Qt tutorials in Spanish, Plural sites introductory course on Qt4.